you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today I want to talk to you guys about Turo, and I want to dive into whether or not and in what circumstances I believe that Turo is a business worth pursuing in 2021. I get this question all the time, and it's something that is harder to answer than you would think. So in this video, I really want to break down what my thoughts are on Turo, whether or not I think it's a viable side hustle in 2021, and whether I think it's still worth pursuing. So let's get started. Now, before we dive in, I would like to remind you all that I do have a car sharing masterclass. I will include a link to this down in the description below, as well as in the pinned comment section as well. I will also include a coupon code that will give you $25 off the purchase of that course. But in this course, I take you through the entire process of my own Turo business and what I do in order to make six figures renting out cars in a semi-passive way. So if you're interested in learning more about car sharing and how to turn it into a viable business, then definitely check that out. So now let's dig into the topic of the video, which is Turo a viable business in 2021? Now, this is a question that I get all the time, and to be honest with you, it's something that is a bit difficult to answer because of the fact that there are a bunch of different factors that come into play when dictating whether or not Turo is a good idea. But instead of going over each individual factor that will dictate whether or not Turo is a good business model for you, I want to instead focus on the three most important factors. These are the three most important factors that I think, more than any other factor, will dictate whether or not Turo is worth it to pursue for you in 2021. And with that, the very first factor that I think you should keep in mind if you're wanting to pursue Turo is whether or not you have the ability and the knowledge to work on cars. I am a big believer that in order to have a successful Turo business, you have to have an understanding of cars. Now, you don't have to be an expert mechanic, you don't have to be a master mechanic, you don't have to have an official certification, but you have to be able to diagnose and work on your cars in a basic way. And what I mean by this is that you don't necessarily need to be able to take out transmissions, take out engines, rebuild engine blocks, but you do have to be able to understand when and how maintenance takes place. You should understand how to do an oil change, how to do spark plug changes, how to do tire rotations. You should understand how to do these basic skills. And for the skills that you can't do yourself, you should be able to form relationships with local shops so that this work can get done in a cost-effective way. I accredit my success with Turo to the fact that I've been able to do a lot of my maintenance work and a lot of my repairs in a very cost-effective way because of the fact that between me and my fiance HP, as well as our connections that we've made in the automotive industry, we're able to repair and fix cars in an extremely cost-effective manner. For example, Turo may pay us out on a damage claim for $2,000 for fender damage. Well, between my knowledge and HP's knowledge, we can get that exact same fender replaced for maybe $200, which is an $1,800 profit. And this exact same scenario has played out with Turo on a number of different occasions. The fact is that Turo profit margin is simply not large enough to take your cars to a professional shop each and every time. And I'm not asking you to cut corners. I'm not telling you that you should use duct tape and Gorilla Glue to fix your car if it's in an accident. But what I am telling you is that the maintenance that can be done from your house, the maintenance that can be done on your own, things like oil changes, taking off a fender panel, taking off a front bumper, doing a spark plug change. Those are things that you can do on your own safely. And if you're running a Turo business, you absolutely should, because that's how you will really multiply your profit margin by an exponential amount. And in my opinion, I think that this is the only way that Turo makes sense, is if you can increase your profit margin by doing the maintenance and the repairs and the work on your own. And if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the expertise, if you don't have the ability to find somebody that can do the work for you at a discount, or if you don't have the willingness to learn, then I personally think that Turo just simply is not worth it for the amount of money that you have the potential of making. But the good news is that anybody can learn how to work on cars. And the vast majority of information of how I've learned is through YouTube and watching videos and connecting with people that I know who also know about cars. Anybody can learn how to do these basic maintenance items. So there certainly isn't a barrier to entry, but the question is, do you want to learn? If so, I think absolutely Turo is a great investment. Factor number 2 is your willingness to make the business as passive as possible. This is something that I talk about in great detail in my car sharing course. It's something that I've talked about a lot on this YouTube channel as well. In my opinion, I think that one of the best ways and one of the only ways to profitably run Turo is in a passive way. What I mean by that is you want to minimize the amount of time that you're working on the business to as little as possible. And this means minimizing your contact with the guests that are renting your cars. Now, whenever it comes to Turo, there are two schools of thoughts on how you can have the guest pick up the vehicle from you. You can meet the guest in person each and every time, and whenever this happens, it's like a traditional rental car exchange. You would give the key to the guest, they would give you your license, you would probably small talk for a bit, they would then go on their way. This, in an ideal situation, would probably take between 5 to 15 minutes, sometimes longer, maybe sometimes less. But the alternative to that is a remote key exchange, and this is when everything is done virtually. Typically, you'll have the key at the car location in like a security box or a lock box or some sort of safe. You will then give instructions to the guest on how they retrieve the key, and everything from there on out is done virtually through the Turo app. This means that you never have to meet a guest in person. That means you don't have to go to your location to talk with the guest. You don't need a small talk. You don't need to revolve your day around when and how a car is being picked up. This is the remote key exchange process, and in my opinion, I think the remote key exchange process is the single best way to run a Turo business, and it is the only way I would even think about running a Turo business in 2021. The key to running a successful Turo business in 2021 is one of two things. Number one, keeping your profit margin as large as possible and keeping your time commitment as low as possible. If you can do these two things successfully, then you can run a successful Turo business. We talked about raising your profit margins in that first point with vehicle maintenance, and decreasing your time commitment is with this point, with remote key exchanges. One of the best ways to run a profitable Turo business is by minimizing the contact that you have with your guests directly, and the best way to do this is through remote key exchange. Now, in my opinion, I think that there isn't really any cons to doing business this way, but there are a lot of people that feel a bit uneasy with the idea of giving their vehicle to somebody they've never met in person. And my response to that uneasiness would be, if you don't feel comfortable giving your car out to somebody you don't know, if you don't feel comfortable giving your car out to somebody you've never met before, then Turo simply is not the business model for you. I think the only way Turo makes sense in 2021 is if you can run it in a passive and efficient way, and a remote key exchange is the way to do that. And the third factor is buying the cars at the right price. Now, this is something that, again, I talk about in a lot of depth in my course, but I've also talked about it a ton on this channel. I think that the only way you can have a profitable Turo business is if you buy your cars below market value, below actual cash value. Now, let me explain in a bit more detail. So whenever I talk about Turo, I always talk about it in the context of buying low budget economy cars in like the $2,500 to $5,000 range. This is how I've been able to become successful in Turo. It's the type of business model I advocate for. It's the type of business model I know that works. But I will agree, it's not the only business model that works. I don't think that renting out low budget economy cars is the only way to be successful in Turo. But I do think that the only way to be successful on Turo is by buying cars below market value. Because of the fact, whenever it comes to sell those cars, whenever those cars get damaged, if there is a total loss, if you do not buy your cars below market value, you will lose money on those transactions. And that loss could end up making or breaking your Turo business. Let me give you a personal example. I bought a 2007 Ford Focus back in 2019. I bought it for just about $2,800. That Turo car went on 120 trips, it racked up 40,000 miles, and it made me over $9,000 over the course of its Turo career. And in January of 2021, it was totaled. Whenever it came to dealing with the total loss of that vehicle, I was actually able to make money because Turo paid me just under $4,500 for that car, and I paid $2,800 for it, which makes for a pretty good profit. This is where the cost that you pay for your vehicles makes a huge difference. And if you're somebody who's constantly finding yourself buying cars new or buying them at MSRP or buying them directly from dealerships, I fear that you're setting yourself up for failure, and that if that car gets damaged or once it comes time to sell that car, you will lose a lot of money, and you won't really end up feeling the hurt of that loss until it's time to deal with those issues. Personally, I feel as though the only way you can run a profitable Turo business is if you buy your cars at the right price. But the good news is this is something that anybody can do with patience, with some research, and with a little bit of know-how on vehicle makes, models, and prices. You can easily accomplish this. You just need to be patient. The fact is that answering the question of is Turo a good side business to pursue in 2021 is such a tough question to answer because of these factors that I've discussed in this video, and because of other ones that I simply don't have time to discuss. The fact is, though, if you are somebody who knows about cars, or at least you're willing to learn about cars, if you're somebody who is willing to kind of let your hands off of the wheel and run Turo in a passive way through remote key exchanges, and if you're somebody who is able and willing to do research on cars and be patient in the way in which you purchase your cars, If you can do these three things, then I wholeheartedly believe that you can absolutely have a profitable Turo business. I feel as though where people end up failing with Turo is either through the maintenance and repair costs of their fleet, by buying too expensive of vehicles and really getting hurt whenever it's time to sell or whenever those cars are totaled, and lastly, whenever it comes to them dedicating simply too much time to the business as a whole. These are the three areas where I see failure most often, and the things that I've discussed in this video are great ways to avoid those points of failure. The great thing though is that all of these things that I've discussed are things that you can learn and you can research, so I still do believe that Turo is accessible to anybody. But the real question is, are you guys going to want to learn about the things that you need to learn in order to run a successful Turo business? And that's where I think that you will see some separation between the successful hosts and the hosts that ultimately end up failing. But really, I do believe that if you want to be successful at Turo and if you have a willingness to learn, you can 100% be successful at Turo. It's a great side hustle. I don't recommend it as a full-time job just because of the lack of control. But as far as side businesses that can accompany your 9-to-5 job, I think that there is not a better one out there than Turo and peer-to-peer car sharing. But like always, you guys, I would love to hear your thoughts. Remember that I do have a peer-to-peer car sharing course. Check out the link to that down in the description below, as well as the $25 off coupon code. But if you have any comments, if you have any questions, if you have anything to add, make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I'll see you guys in the next video.